Dear friends in America, members of the society, it is a big honor for me to speak to you, to the AGM this year, also on Zoom. And I want to start with some personal remarks. When I came first to the United States of America for lectures about anthroposophy, invited by Steiner Books, that means by Jean Gallagly, Christopher Bamford, and the co-workers Marsha Post, Mary Giddens, and all the friends working there in the editing house. It was a very special inner experience for me. I felt never very close to the United States of America, to be honest. At school, it was difficult for me to learn the English language. But Jean Gallagly convinced me to come to the West. So I came for some lectures. And it was in my memory shortly after 9/11. It was not really shortly because some years after. But I experienced a country still traumatized. Especially the experience in New York, Manhattan, I will never forget this. And from that point on, New York, Manhattan, and also the United States of America became for me a country wounded in the shock of the 20th or 21st century. And the topic of some lectures also in Manhattan were the fifth gospel of Dr. Steiner. And I experienced such an openness, such a sensitivity of all those who listened to the lectures in those years. I also gave some lectures about the fifth gospel in Basel or at the Goetheanum in Dornach, but it was not the same. So the receptiveness, the open-minded souls, as I said, traumatized, or with such a kind of sensitivity, made a deep impression on me. Many years ago, I read Willem Seilmans of Emmichhoven, as you know, a famous anthroposophist and co-worker of Dr. Steiner, and he gave many lectures in the world and also in the United States of America. And he once had an experience and said, Christ is leading the American people, North American people. And it was a very difficult statement, but it was an inner experience of him. I experienced deep Christian impulses in those rooms where I was privileged to lecture or to have conversations. And insofar this opportunity now, during this conference, to say some words about the culture of selflessness came directly to my heart, to be honest. I haven't been in America the last years since Trump is voted. There are no more opportunities to come to you on a physical plane. But the themes of the fifth gospel, the culture of selflessness, never left my life. And it was also one of the, I would say, surprising and deeply moving events that Steiner Books was able to translate a book I've written about an anthroposophist, a Jewish anthroposophist who died in Auschwitz, Maria Grebel-Darmstädter. And we also had a seminar in Auschwitz-Birkenau about her and her life and her death in the concentration camp. So the culture of selflessness, the fifth gospel, the tragedy of our modern times, of the 20th century and the ongoing time is a theme for me, for all my work, and I think for our time. Now at the Goetheanum, in the last few weeks, we had 2 conferences, very impressive conferences. The one was the big medical conference in September, a worldwide conference, 100 years of anthroposophical medicine. And as you know, many of our colleagues could not come because of the corona situation and regulations. But all in all, 800 people gathered at the Goetheanum, and more than 50 parallel conferences in the world took place. It was deeply impressive. There were many young people at the Goetheanum. There was such an atmosphere of warmth, light and hope. Encouragement in the time of abysses. Deeply impressive for me to take part in the conference. And then we had another one of the new general anthroposophical section. It was smaller, about the statue, about the Christ statue and the powers of evil. So just preparing Michael Mess. And both conferences had to do with the mystery of the earth and with our responsibility now in a very difficult worldwide situation. And I feel that the theme of the culture of selflessness has to do with this situation. As you all know, as members of the Anthroposophical Societies and friend of anthroposophy, Dr. Steiner founded a new mystery site on this small hill nearby Basilea, Basel. A new mystery site, he said, a Christian mystery site in modern times. But from the beginning on, he placed this site, this mystery site, on a specific task in our time. He said, recognizing, enduring and overcoming evil. So the mystery of evil as the central mystery of our time. To overcome it by doing the good. But first listening to the cry. So in a certain way, the statue of Christ was maybe not a surprise in the Goetheanum, but in the middle of the powers of evil. This was a surprise at these days in the beginning of the 20th century, 100 years ago. That Steiner by himself brought the problem of evil in the middle of the new mystery site, accompanying the Christ. So what humanity has to learn in our time has to do with the problem of evil. And as you all know, the whole 5th Gospel has to do with this problem. The 5th Gospel is a book, Steiner said, which is so needed for the future. A book of strength. Also a book of comfort and health. For me, these descriptions were surprising when I came across them many years ago, because it's not at all a book of, in a way, feeling comfortable. But he said it's a book of comfort and health and strength. The 5th Gospel has to do with the way Jesus of Nazareth had to go to receive the Christ impulse. The baptism in the Jordan and all what happened the 3 years after it. But to prepare his own soul for this baptism had to do with suffering, to endure the needs of the time, to undergo with a strong inner participation, with empathy, all the suffering around. And the central message of this part of the 5th Gospel is that this kind of suffering was not a physical suffering, it was a spiritual suffering. So Jesus of Nazareth experienced the fact that no traditional religion, and even not the so high developed Judaism, is actually able to overcome the central problem at the turning point of time. And the new esoteric traits or the mystery sites in Palestine were not able to. And the new esoteric groups, as the Essener, as Dr. Steiner called them, were not able to. So this Jesus of Nazareth experienced a situation where he had to realize that a new impulse is needed to save and heal the world or the earth or mankind. And what Dr. Steiner tried to explain, that we have to experience the same. The developing path in the modern times now has to do with suffering. Quite often it's not our own suffering. And I think at the moment, with this COVID crisis, the majority of people listening to this lecture are not directly hurted, physically hurted, but we can experience the immense pain around us. In other countries, the pain created by the disease and the pain and misery created out of the handling of the disease. So we can witness our time, and we have to do this, even if we are maybe not directly affected. A schooling path to witness the misery of the time. In a certain way, to study the fifth gospel is in itself a schooling path. To take part in the situation Jesus of Nazareth experienced at the turning point of time. It can be shocking that Dr. Steiner said human beings are able to a kind of imitatio Jesu. So we have a possibility to go the same path. First to study his path, but later to transform it into our own biography. And he said in a quotation from a lecture, to recognize the Christ means to go through the school of selflessness. Under the influence of materialism, humanity lost its selflessness in ways that will only be recognized in future times. But by immersing ourselves with the mystery of Golgotha, by imbuing our perception of it with all our feelings and all our entire soul being, we can once again achieve a culture of selflessness. Humanity must become ever more selfless. That is the future of all truly moral actions in this life, the future of all deeds of love that can happen through earthly humanity. There are several hints that Dr. Steiner wanted to lecture about the fifth gospel in the Goetheanum itself. But the fulfillment of the building was postponed. It took longer time. And Steiner had to start. He could not wait anymore. So directly after the laying of the foundation stone, he started to lecture about the fifth gospel, not in Dornach, but in countries around, beginning in Norway. Usually we call it the periphery, but what is the periphery and what is the center? But anyway, in this case, it was like an envelope to the seat of the Goetheanum. And this cooling path, I'm sure Dr. Steiner wanted to show this also, is so necessary for the community of the Goetheanum, for all those worldwide who will take part in the development of these new mystery sites. And those people can't be identified only with them who work there physically in the building, but a worldwide community of Goetheanum people needing a schooling path in a new school, a school of selflessness. And this school of selflessness is, surprisingly or not, the school of Christ, or Christ Michael. Maybe you know that Dr. Steiner wanted to finishing and open the Goetheanum 1st of August 1914. He said from 1913 on, we should fulfill the building and then open it 1st of August 1914. He repeatedly mentioned this date, 1st of August 1914. He wanted to open it, as we heard, by an oral tradition, it's not in a lecture, by a fifth mystery play. And this makes sense for me. A fifth mystery play in the Goetheanum itself. But I think most of you know what happened in 1st of August 1914, not the opening of the Goetheanum, but the opening of the First World War. 2 days afterwards, middle of August, Dr. Steiner created a kind of a little lecture course, but with practical exercises. And the practical exercises were to support wounded people, the so-called Samaritan course, where a doctor from Ukraine, Henrietta Ginda-Fritkin, showed how to help people wounded, and Dr. Steiner gave lectures with inner mantric exercises for an inner attitude for those who want to help. So the outer practical treatments, they have a chance to get more efficient if the inner attitude is adapted to the situation. And one of these mantras Dr. Steiner spoke, just to begin, was, as long as you feel the pain that I avoid, the Christ remains unrecognized at work within the world being. So that means as only you feel the pain, and not me, because it's not my pain, my physical pain, Christ is not recognized on earth. So the suffering of the other should be the suffering of mine, even if I am not directly touched. This was also a kind of a training of the capacity of love and compassion. Dr. Steiner showed in lectures he gave in previous years that Christ is approaching humanity on earth in the 20th century. The so-called reappearance of Christ in the etheric. But he posed the question, What is the etheric body of the Christ reappearing? How is it formed, this etheric body? And the surprising answer, it's not formed by the spiritual world. We would believe that if Christ is coming in an etheric body, he will bring the body with him. No, Dr. Steiner said, it has to do with us. He will only reappear if the etheric body is formed, built by human souls on earth. So he is partly dependent on us, or completely dependent on us. At least the reappearance is dependent on us. And the etheric body of the Christ is shaped, he said, by human feelings of empathy, of love and empathy, with the suffering other. So if we participate in the suffering of our time, but in concrete, with concrete human beings, and not in general abstract love for humanity, now in a very concrete way, we take part in the other ones, but we also take part in Christ. Probably you know that Steiner Books also published a little booklet of mine. The title is The Culture of Selflessness. And when we discussed the cover for this little booklet, I proposed the one we had in the German edition. Maybe you can see it. I think you all know this sculpture. It made a deep impression on me. It's done by Fritz Koenig for the World Trade Center. And I think you all know that the Fritz Koenig sculpture was wounded but survived as a work of art, 9/11. The Sphere, the sculpture is called, and now still, as I hope, on the Battery Park by the South Ferry coast of Manhattan. For me, it was always a symbol in these years when I came to the United States of this world situation, the traumatized sphere, but also the forces of overcoming and being united. Wounded but united, or united in suffering, with this cooling path. So it has to do with the etheric body of the Christ on a spiritual plane. It's not only a sculpture. It has to do for me with the other sculpture, with the Christ in between the forces of evil. Christ and evil. Christ who has to fight against Ahriman till the end of the earth. The fight will continue. Culture of selflessness means also that we are not alone. If you really witness our times, we come in quite difficult situations, as we do now, worldwide. Steiner predicted that many people in the 20th century and later will have Christ inner experiences out of the churches and not belonging only to the Christian confession. It's not a question of traditional religion. It's a question of experience the Christ inwardly. As a friend, as Dr. Steiner predicted, and counselor. We receive his advice. to experience the Christ as a person walking beside us, alongside our street, in an inner, direct personal experience. But only if we really confront ourselves to the need of our time. So a kind of an esoteric meditative experience in practical life may be easier to obtain if you really take part in the mystery of our time as a social worker or as somebody who is willing doing good deeds. In the mystery time may be easier to obtain this experience than in a meditative room at home. I want to underline this because we said Dr. Steiner was an esoteric person, but anthroposophy was always, from the beginning on, part of the history and the development of the 20th century. And the anthroposophy was brought to Berlin by Steiner. This is the German city where the center of evil was created years later. And it's not by accident that Dr. Steiner lectured about anthroposophy just in Berlin. And maybe you know that some buildings had a special significance. There was one big Berlin building where Dr. Steiner gave all the public lectures about anthroposophy, and many of Steiner's latest followers, pupils, found anthroposophy there. Ite Wegmann, Albert Steffen, Christian Morgenstern. A huge building in the Wilhelmstraße in Berlin. Later it belonged to the German military government during the First World War. But Steiner went on in lecturing there, just on this place. And after Steiner's death, some years later, the Nazis destroyed the building, and in the same place they erected a new huge building for the military war of Germany, Göring's Ministerium. So it's the same spot in Berlin where Steiner wanted to bring anthroposophy as one or as the alternative to this Ahrimanic force of destruction. I want to mention this because the culture of selflessness theme is a wonderful theme, a warm and lightful theme, but on the same time it has central to do with the mystery of evil. And it's maybe also a signature of history that this doctor of Ukraine, Henrietta Ginder-Fritkin, who gave this course together with Dr. Steiner on the Dornach Hill in August 1914, is the only anthroposophical doctor we know who died in Auschwitz-Birkenau. In the concentration camp, she was Jewish, and she was deported from France in 1942. She was arrested and then deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and she died there in the gas chamber. And we discovered now in historical scientific researches that she was in the same transport to Auschwitz with Maria Darmstädter. So two anthroposophists on the way to this incredible, horrible place. And the one was a doctor from the mystery side in Dornach, and the other one a leading anthroposophist and member also of the Christian community, Maria Darmstädter. From Maria Darmstädter we have several letters written not in Auschwitz, where you could not write any more letters, but from another camp where she was arrested in France. And I edited in this book, also published by Steiner Books. This is the book about Maria Darmstädter. And there are some letters edited from the prisoner camp in France. And she's writing, "There is no doubt these are times of initiation." About Maria Krebel-Darmstädter, some other prisoners were very surprised about her because she lived with the other ones in the camp, but she was always helping the others. And then she died in Auschwitz, as I said, but later on people remembered her, and there was one priest of a Protestant church. He wrote after the Second World War, "I'm certain that Germany, Europe and the world today has urgent need of a great number of people of her kind. People as Maria Darmstädter." This priest did not know at all about anthroposophy, but he experienced her in the camp. She had plans for the time, post-war time. In one letter she's writing, "I'll be glad when this war has ended and one is allowed to go anywhere again. Nurse others, dress wounds of both body and soul, but of the soul still more." So, in a certain way, a wounded humanity, physically, but of the soul still more. In our actual world situation, dominated by medicine or by health organization or health policy, there is also a tremendous hurting of the soul. So healing forces are needed. A new confidence in life, but also a new to trust life and to trust the other one, to trust the life forces. Also a new trust in our capacity to overcome problems. Not only to protect ourselves, our societies, our nations against, but to reopen the world. It is very strange maybe for all of us that this year, which was predicted to be, for us at least, the year of anthroposophical medicine, became a year of panic and fear, of disease and health policy. And in a certain way, or in the same time, a year of reinforced nationalism, closing the borders, destroying the bridges, and also racism, nationalism and extreme racism. From an anthroposophical perspective, and I don't think that I'm telling you news to you, both problems has the same source. Dr. Steiner was describing the onset of the Michaelic age, Michael fighting against the adversary powers in the 19th century in the etheric level around the earth, and he overcame the dragon. But that meant that the Ahrimanic forces fell down on earth. So Michael won the fight on the spiritual plan, and that's essential for us because it opened the gate for Christ coming. So Michael cleared up the etheric space. But on earth, there was an intensification of Ahrimanic power. And Dr. Steiner said in lectures that there will be two main manifestations. The one manifestation will be all kind of infectious diseases, and on the other side there will be nationalism, racism, and so on. Both has to do with a kind of an Ahrimanic signature. And now we see that a lot of the problems we have to do now in handling infectious diseases, viral diseases, they have to do with the destruction of the ecological situation on Earth. Some of you have read, and I was deeply touched that you did this study, have read Ita Wegman's essay about the mystery of the Earth. It's an essay from 1928 or beginning of 1929, but it's really anticipating the coming future. She's also talking about the climate situation. So humanity, with its technological power, with its Ahrimanic forces of egotism, is destroying the ecosystems. And the ecosystems collapse. And the place where the animals are allowed to live, they are reduced. And we know that one aspect of difficult viral diseases are that these microorganisms, they were shared by animals and human beings, because the life sphere of the animals is destroyed and they come closer to human beings, and there are side effects and other effects. So those types of diseases, they don't come out of a blue. I know that there are many different theories, but one aspect is the ecological. And the ecological aspect is closely linked to the Ahrimanic aspect of our modern civilization. Nationalism, racism, another aspect, how Ahriman divides human beings. And now we see that many of the health policies, strategies against protecting against diseases have the same effect, isolating people, closing borders, creating Zoom conferences, which connect us at the moment, but I think we all experienced the isolation. So there's also a signature, an Ahrimanic signature in this kind of protection. And the other human being is not only my friend, but tends to become a potential aggressor. So I have to protect myself against all other human beings. This is the theory behind. So I think we all see that there is an incredible Ahrimanic signature in the actual world situation, but it's not at all surprising. I think we all were very surprised by the development of the year 2020. We have not expected this situation, but I think we expected the signature, because it's an Ahrimanic signature. And we are partly without any power to act against it. So we're just witnessing our time. And when Dr. Steiner was asked in the First World War, what can we do as anthroposophists? Sometimes he said just nothing. But we can try to understand the whole situation on a deeper level. So this is an enormous step to understand more of the complex problem. There are no simple solutions. And then there will be a time in the future, he said, where we can really intervene, we can act. So history had times where we just have to work for a deeper understanding, and later on maybe we are asked to help. Of course, it is not only neither nor. We can do many things at the moment, but maybe on a general level we are partly fixed at home or wherever you are. A deeper understanding, and to train ourselves in the culture of selflessness. Maybe also this situation now as a little exercise, at least for me. I'm sitting in the house of Ita Wegmann in Arlesheim. On the background, maybe you wondered, it is a blackboard drawing of Dr. Steiner hanging in my room, in my office, out of the course for curative education. Dr. Steiner is designing on the blackboard the situation of 3 children. And the Zoom situation for me, it's a kind of a training, not only by the technical means, which are for me new, but to have no real audience. Or there is a real audience, you are very real, but not in my room. So usually if I try to lecture, I try to grasp the situation in the room. Even if I don't fix people in the eyes, but it is in the aura of the room, the souls who are in the room. And now it is only my own room, and you are all not in Arlesheim. But this is the training, one of the aspects of the training, a bridge to another continent, to souls who are not in the room. And to try to get a sensitivity that it's possible to do such a contribution for an AGM, which is only happening on a almost spiritual level. This is new, but it is part of a culture of selflessness. As also our relationship to the dead, to the living dead. They are not in our room. They are no more in our biography acting. But we try to grasp and we try to connect. We try to be with them. And as far as we use such tools as the Zoom now, for me on an esoteric level, we work with an Ahrimanic tool, but in trying to overcome it. Concerning Ahriman, Dr. Steiner always said we have to do anything for him, because he sacrificed his own development for the development of humanity. Ahriman had to bring forces into the human development that we can create freedom, individual judgment, partly against him, but he enabled us by creating hinderings, enormous hinderings. But now he is fixed. He bent himself in this role. He lost his own development. And we have to do something for him to resolve the problem. The redemption of Ahriman. This is a very difficult target. But I think sometimes if we use such tools as today for such content, it can be a little contribution. We should be aware of this dimension. Culture of selflessness is also a need to create a situation of redemption for the powers of evil. I don't think for the Asuras, and I don't think for Surat. And as you know, they are not part of the sculpture in the Götteranum. Only Lucifer and Ahriman belong to the development of humanity in a closer sense. Partly the Asuras, but no more Surat. But if we overcome Lucifer and Ahriman, they can't work. Because they use the work of Ahriman and Lucifer to come into humanity. So Ahriman and Lucifer, they belong to us. And overcoming evil means also redemption of evil to a certain extent. So culture of selflessness, for me, it has to do with another relationship to our human beings, even if they are not in the room. And there are wonderful Waldorf teachers and other teachers who try to keep the bridges to their children by the phone call, by Zoom, or also other by inner meditative work on an esoteric level. This is also an exercise. And we had to practice many exercises the last 6 or 7 months. But I think culture of selflessness is even more. How to counterbalance the egocentric, materialistic age, how to counterbalance it. How to work with or against, but also with Ahriman and Lucifer for the Christ impulse. How to handle technology. There are many aspects of a culture of selflessness. It's not only one. And to close this lecture, I just want to underline again that we feel, I think all of us feel quite often totally overwhelmed by the global situation, and it will get worse. On an economic, on an ecological level, on other levels. Such a kind of shutdown never happened before. To freeze the life, frozen life, unlived life, in a signature of protection, but anyway in a very dangerous signature. Frozen life, cold life. And it will create, and it does create, enormous damage. We all know it now, but you could foresee it in March, April this year. It is not at all a surprise that these kind of lockdown, shutdown, by the way, Ahrimanic words, freezing the life will create enormous damage. So the situation is getting worse, and is getting worse from day to day in many, many countries. Very poor countries. And so the situation we have to confront is getting enormously difficult. And I said we can feel totally overburdened, even if our private sphere, our family, our anthroposophical branch is maybe protected for a certain time. But on the other side, I want to stress, this is the signature in which Dr. Steiner brought the Götteranum as the new mystery site and as a source of hope and warmth and light, and the Christ impulse in between. So I would say it is maybe a kind of a surprise in the manifestation, but not in the signature. And if we feel overburdened, we should never forget that the Christ impulse can be very present, especially in such times. And this culture of selflessness and the fifth gospel is the book of our time. I'm totally convinced. Since I've been in Manhattan, 9/11, kind of a beginning of the 21st century. So let me say this as a little contribution from Alesheim Dornach to your AGM, not at all a solution and not at all a kind of a device how to practice. I think it had to be individualized, but I hope that the conference itself is a contribution for creating such a culture. And to end again with the words of Dr. Steiner, to recognize the Christ means to go through the school of selflessness. Under the influence of materialism, humanity lost its selflessness in ways that will only be recognized in future times. But by immersing ourselves with the mystery of Golgotha, by imbuing our perception of it with all our feelings and our entire soul being, we can once again achieve a culture of selflessness. This is the future of all truly moral actions in this life, the future of all deeds of love that can happen through earthly humanity. Thank you very much for listening and forgive my limited possibilities to express in the English language. Thank you.